This video will continue information on the Age of Absolutism, Roman numeral 2 of your typed outline. The last video stopped with Richelieu's Intendant system, which is here on number 5. So I'm going to pick up with the information that you can specifically write down about that system, and then we will move on to finish up the information, as you can see here, on Roman numeral 2, France and absolutism. So the Intendant system divided France into 32 districts, and that will help better organize the country. Each district will be headed by an Intendant, more about that person in a minute, who will act as a government agent in that district that he has been assigned to. Now, an Intendant is someone who will never come from the nobility, and think about why that's going to be the case. Remember, we mentioned how Richelieu is trying to make Louis XIII the most powerful man in France. And if he's going to successfully do that, he has to limit or reduce the power of the nobility. And if you give a member of the nobility an Intendant position, that's just giving him a lot of power. And that's what Richelieu wants to avoid. So when these Intendants are chosen, they come from the middle class. And the word for middle class in France is the bourgeoisie. So I've spelled it here if you need the spelling. So if you see the word bourgeoisie, that refers to the middle class, specifically in France. So again, make sure you know the whole purpose of Richelieu creating this Intendant system was to weaken the nobility or limit their power. All that information is again put on number 5 on your typed outline. So we know that Richelieu will be very successful in keeping the nobles' power limited. And we already know he's keeping that watchful eye on the Huguenots. Now, we also know that a lot of Richelieu's policies are not going to be very popular with the people of France. That's pretty obvious. They're not all going to like what he's doing. Okay? And we all know that that's part of life. Not everybody is going to like you. And there's nothing wrong with that. But what Richelieu is going to do is make it very clear that he is, the authority operating, of course, according to how Louis XIII would want. So to give you an example of some of the policies that were not popular with the people of France, Richelieu will raise taxes on the poor. So this is under 6A on your typed outline. That obviously is going to anger the poor because, they don't have a lot of money to begin with, and now they're being taxed with what little they have. He also will strip power from the nobility. We know that angers the nobles. And this is a good point to mention that it's not just the nobles who may not be completely loyal to Richelieu. We know that there were some nobles who are going to be loyal, and later we'll go over some specific privileges that they might have down the road. But make no mistake, he's trying to, of course, keep their power subdued. We also know he will anger Catholics by sending France into a war on the side of Protestants. Now, later we will be talking about this specific war, but I'll go ahead and tell you so you can write it down. This is the 30 Years' War, and France is part of that war. And yes, it does last for 30 years, and it's definitely about, religious tensions that were going on. And as you can see, Richelieu, helping to control France, which is very Catholic, will not make the Catholics very happy when he purposely goes into this war on the side of Protestants. What he was trying to do is weaken the rival Catholic nations. Now, politically, that is a very smart move on Richelieu's part, because the last thing you want is to have stronger Catholic rivals out there. And if you can get into a war and help the Protestants, defeat Catholics, then that just makes you as a Catholic nation more powerful and stronger. So that's what his intentions were there. And remember his second goal of wanting to make France the most powerful nation in Europe. So this plan of his to side with Protestants in the 30 Years' War was ultimately part of that goal. Now, real quick, before we go to little b, there is one more thing I do want to bring up about those nobles who were trying to prove that they were loyal to King Louis XIII. Richelieu did make a deal with them that if they did prove that they were loyal to Louis XIII as king, that they would not be required to pay taxes. He also would allow them to carry weapons. So these are like some perks for proving your loyalty to the king. So I do want you to know that not all nobles were disloyal. Okay, some of them wanted to make sure that they had some privileges, and so they were able to convince Richelieu that they were loyal to Louis XIII. Now, on your little b, another one of Richelieu's policies that angered people in France was when he banned the practice of dueling. Now, he had good reason, or what he felt was good reason for doing this. When a new sword was created called the rapier, and if you don't know anything about swords, this one was very sharp tip but lightweight. And so when you have two individuals who would duel and they would use this newer sword, the likelihood of death just went higher. Okay. Again, they could duel a lot easier with it because it's lightweight, but it was a lot sharper. So that made it more deadly. And, I think there's some misconceptions out there that when you have a duel, someone is going to die. Yes, if you use the rapier, the newer sword. But prior to this creation of a sword, a lot of the swords were very dull, when they would use them. And so, sure, you could get injured, but death wasn't always the result. Now, the likelihood of someone dying in a duel just went up, and the likelihood of it being a nobleman who might be loyal to the king is now higher. And that's the last thing Richelieu wants, is to lose anyone who is loyal to the king. So he said, we got to get rid of dueling. Can't have that practice at all. Can't take those chances. So those are some of the policies that were not popular with the people of France that Richelieu put in place. Now, to wrap up Richelieu, we know that he died 6 months before Louis XIII. And Richelieu was like a father figure to Louis XIII. Remember, Louis was only 10 years old when his father, Henry IV, was stabbed to death by the extreme monk. So this is really the one man that Louis XIII has looked up to as a father figure. And Richelieu had a great relationship with him and will leave everything that he had to Louis XIII, including this beautiful home of Richelieu's named the Palais Royal, which is in Paris, France. Of course, today it is not used as a royal residence. It is actually part of the magnificent Louvre Museum that houses some of the greatest pieces of art that are in the world. So just wanted to give you an update of what it's used for today if you ever visit Paris, France. The last two topics on your typed outline for Roman numeral 2 are just kind of thrown, at the very end. I didn't have really a great place where to put these. So they are important. So make sure you get this written down. Anytime we are talking about the Bourbon family ruling France, they have a symbol for their family, and that symbol is the fleur de lis, which translates into English to mean flower of the lily. So anytime we are studying the Bourbons, you will see this royal symbol on everything that they own, their clothing, on the walls, anything. So make no mistake, the fleur de lis is the royal symbol for the Bourbon family. And yes, that's where the New Orleans Saints gets, of course, this symbol. The last topic dealing with France and absolutism is the St. Bartholomew Day Massacre. So make sure you get these key points written down. First of all, St. Bartholomew Day is a religious festival for Catholics. So that's why it's an important day. We know that this is an incident in which French Catholics are going to be responsible for killing a large number of French Protestants, with the goal in mind to kill as many Protestants in France as possible, okay? And the person that instigated this or arranged this massacre was Catherine de' Medici. So let me start with some background for you to understand what was going on. You do not have to write down the background, okay? Before Henry IV was ever the king of France, he was going to marry the current king's sister. Current king was Charles the Ninth. The problem is Henry was Protestant and the king and his sister were Catholic, okay? The king's mother was Catherine de' Medici, pictured here, and she's not happy that her daughter is about to get married to a Protestant. So she devised a plan telling all the Protestants who had been invited to the wedding that they're not allowed to bring any weapons. So if they want to show up to the wedding, they cannot bring any weapons. Okay, if you did, you wouldn't be allowed in the wedding. So it's the day of the wedding for Henry IV and the King of France before him, his sister. Well, here come all these thousands of Protestants to Paris to celebrate this wedding. And Catherine had already arranged for a signal, which was the bell in the church tower, that when that bell started ringing, that would be the moment for the Catholics to take out their weapons and start killing Protestants. So yes, as horrible as this sounds, this wedding was interrupted by this absolute killing spree that will take place. We're talking about 4,000 people on this one day alone. And then there will be weeks of fighting between Catholics and Protestants that follow this one day. And so we're looking at about 20,000 Protestants in the end being killed by Catholics. So this is an event in French history that is very important, and you want to make sure that you know. All right, so we are now finished with Roman numeral 2 on French absolutism, and the next outline we're going to go over deals with Roman numeral 3 with the son of Louis the 13th. So you'll find out when Louis the 13th dies, his son, who will be given the title Louis the 14th, will take over. And he's one of the most famous French kings. So very important that you don't miss out on information on Roman numeral 3.